Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor, Greg Dooley, and the Pundit, Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
That's right. It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. We're presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. Validation. Michigan beating Ohio State for the third straight year and is going to Indy and sheds doubt on those who think that advanced scouting had anything to do with Michigan's renaissance. Greg, what a feeling.
What a feeling, and I think we're going to be in the studio for a few more weeks talking about Michigan football. That's 3, Steve, as I told everyone walking out of the game. Complete strangers were hugging. It was great. Just a little business. Thank you for all the followers. Like I've said, over 500 followers, over 50,000 plays. And thank you so much. If you are so inclined, please consider following. If you don't, share with your friends. We have obviously a fired up show today and many, many more to come. And we are available on the Autograph app with new podcast features. Even got a Michigan versus everybody wristband that those guys put out there with Tom Brady. By the way, Steve, I got to do a shout out to all my brothers and sisters at the U of M Club of Flint, who I got to speak to at their rally last week.
It's quite a gathering.
Oh, it was a huge crowd. They were hooting, they were hollering, they were cheering, they were standing during a history lesson. Those are my people up there. So,
history professors all across the United States are wishing they could have that type of reaction when they're talking about the Civil War.
You're not kidding. And I want to say thank you to all of them. By the way, we have some fans up there in Flint, of course, Steve. They said we love the podcast. So I plan to be back. Maybe next time we'll do a show up there with U of M of Flint or something like that down in the future.
Makes you want to go back on Tuesday, doesn't it?
Dude, I'm ready. But boy, what a great Saturday, man.
Let's talk about what it means. First of all, the bare basics. U of M has now won 3 consecutive games against Ohio State. It's the longest winning streak against the Buckeyes since 1995 through 1997. A great 3-year run in its moment. But now these Wolverines are 12-0 in back-to-back seasons for the first time ever. And you have to start to wondering when you see how few and far between it is for Michigan to have that type of record in a circle, in a group, that this may be one of the best times to be a Michigan football fan in history.
Yeah, it's fantastic. My buddy John Crick pointed out, I think our regular season winning streak is like at 28 games, which hasn't been done since Fielding H. Yost first arrived. I mean, these are the things we're starting to talk about, some of these records being broken. JJ's success as at quarterback in games he started is remarkable. It's such a big time. And again, the biggest problem we had was all of the stuff off the field. And you said it with the first words you led with, Steve. It's validation for those other 2 games.
And now Jim Harbaugh is going to be able to come back and coach the team. And I think it makes everyone stop and think about how Michigan really achieved their success. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot gained, if anything at all, from the advanced scouting that was done.
Well, yeah, and I think, again, the more you hear from football people, the more they say it's not that big a deal, it's a joke, and to suggest that the games and the wins are tainted is a joke. Fortunately, Michigan's schedule rolled the way it did, where we did have to really prove ourselves in these last 3 games against really the teams that played us the toughest. And that was kind of expected, maybe with Maryland as a question mark. But you pointed out that would be a tough game early in the season, if I recall, Steve. So for this to happen post sign stealing, reveal, it just worked out so great.
Well,
so
it could work out differently. Let's say Michigan played Maryland or Penn State in early October. They could see it differently. Oh, they really benefit from that. We really don't know how well they did. This is 3 games against 3 of the best teams in the Big Ten, and Michigan went out and won those games.
And let's not forget that with an interim coach, a substitute teacher, as Sam Webb said it, on our sideline, and Chris Partridge gone, so we had to shake up our coaching staff to cover all this stuff. Michigan was harmed by these suspensions, no matter how you slice it, and persevered.
These players and coaches had to handle an enormous challenge. And you know the ramifications for losing this. Well, I mean, we've discussed this before on the podcast. It was so critical. Beating Ohio State this time around was more important than beating them the first time around or the second time around because it was a referendum on their renaissance. And if Ohio State had won, all those people who are on the fence or all those people who are on the Ohio State side of things would suggest that Michigan did benefit from all those things, and everything that goes back to any modicum of success can be attributed to that. Beating Ohio State doesn't eliminate the entire conversation, but for those that are kind of on the fence are going, wow, I mean, they won those games, all of them, Ohio State, Penn State, and Maryland, without their head coach, without Connor Stallions, without the signals and sign stealing. It didn't matter to Michigan in the end, and so there was so much tremendous challenge for those players for a Michigan program that just doesn't go 12-0 that often, and they handled it.
And hats off, by the way, to Ohio State. We'll break down the game, but I think what people saw was just an absolute heavyweight battle with all kinds of future pro prospects, with Michigan persevering, frankly, by being a little tougher. And again, I think in the nation's eyes, and gosh, I can't wait till we see the number of this game. Yeah, I don't know how many millions of people watch this. What, 15, 20? What was it last year? This is going to be nuts.
There was a lot of national people here, too. The people that some Michigan fans despise were actually in the press box, in the press area afterwards. Happened to be with Ward Manuel, with some of those others, to discuss what it all meant and where they go from here. And here's what Ward had to say when comparing what the players went through in handling adversity to what he did and his teammates did when he played.
You know, I played when Bo had a heart attack, and we went to a bowl game. We were led by Coach Moeller. We pulled together. We kept doing what he always told us to do, and what Jim tells these young men to do, and that is nobody's bigger than the team, and we go out there and we give our all to win for Michigan and win for each other. And that's what they did. I'm so proud of the way they have handled it. And the way they've handled this change in their environment. So it makes me proud.
Glad it's over.
I'm glad to have Jim back. I really am. Yes, sir.
Ward Manuel not admitting it's over, but at least they have another year of beating Ohio State.
And we get a full year of this again, of all the countdowns, of all the clocks. When's the last time, Ohio beat Michigan, all that good stuff, and bragging rights. In our neighborhood, we happen to have a few Buckeye families that we all have people at work that we work with.
Who are nice people.
They are wonderful.
Yeah, we get 365 days more of celebrating Michigan beating Ohio State. They get another 365 crying and soul-searching. And this is like really the last time where I think the game means as much. You have the new divisionless Big Ten, and in these situations where number 2 played number 3, all it does is just kind of set up a rematch on a neutral field the following week, which wouldn't be horrible. It kind of takes away a little bit from whoever wins. Kind of like in basketball when you win the regular season Big Ten basketball title and then 4 days later you start the playoff in the conference tournament. No, it doesn't last very long.
It's completely different next year. Also with the new 4 teams coming in and the schedule's changing and Penn State kind of, changing this dynamic and the divisions going away. Look, this is probably that last time.
And theoretically, Greg, it could be the first of 3 Michigan-Ohio State matchups.
Yes, it could.
The first of 3. You could have your regular season, the game, play a week later in Indy for the championship as the top 2 teams, and 3 could meet each other in a 12-team playoff.
Yes. So Michigan, any Big Ten team, could play 17 games next year. That's the maximum a team could play. Again, if you play in the championship, then you play in the first round. First round of the playoffs, again, will be at home. That would be remarkable. But again, yeah, the flavor and the stakes involved in this game with all the history, the recent history, and with the new structure, it probably historically made this the most significant regular season Ohio State game in history. And I don't know that it's close. Yeah. The 2006 bowl game, maybe number 1 versus number 2, with all that going on. But you couldn't say that this cemented the legacy of the last couple of years. It didn't have anything to do with 2005. Like, there was so much on the line. And we'll get into Ryan Day and where he's at and his sad, slow walk up the tunnel with his head slung over. And you can see, like, the band writes on the walls in the last game. Mm-hmm. They, write little messages. And you can see all the little notes as he's slowly walking by. And I tell you what, it's a long walk anyway up to the visitors' locker room. It was super long for Ryan Day.
Here's what the game prevented. Ryan Day having a post-game rant that he's been saving up for.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I've learned about Ryan Day over the last couple of years is that he's got prepared things to say.
You're saying he has a narrative that he's getting ready to go.
During the week, his speech is ready. And he had it for Notre Dame and Lou Holtz, Ohio versus the world. And he also had it against Notre Dame in the very first week in 2022. He had to live with 365 days of hearing about how Michigan out-physicaled, out-toughed. And he wanted to prove that against Notre Dame that they could play a physical brand of football too. And I think it kind of cost them in the Michigan game when they tried to be something that they weren't, more physical, in 2022. And this year, he had something ready to go. And so, one, you got to avoid that big nationwide speech that would have just been cringy and hurt. And the second thing is you're not going to see a flag planting on the Block M like Michigan did on the Block O. No Buckeye players sharing their feelings on the Michigan legacy and making things right. No national media pundits' conclusions.
Pundits
are speaking and writing about Michigan's house of cards. There's no gold pants for Marvin Harrison Jr. and other Buckeyes who haven't beaten Michigan since Ohio State had Michigan's defensive signs in 2019, by the way.
But Michigan does have three charms because Michigan's starting to create their own charms now after we win. So they actually created one. The last 2 years, the players have got a charm. It's a different design each year, but I assume that's a new tradition that will continue this year.
Interesting.
So,
About 100 years after it started for Ohio State. I think it started for Ohio State after 1934.
Correct. Francis Schmidt, their coach, they put their pants on one leg at a time, Steve, and that started the gold pants tradition. Of course, they won that year. Had they not won that year, they'd probably have a different tradition. But winning solves a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, winning changes things a lot. And I think one of the things that it changes a lot for is Sharon Moore, who shows that he can coach.
Yeah.
I mean, he outcalled Ryan Day in this one. And I think Michigan fans can relax a little bit in the fact that if Jim Harbaugh decides to move on, and I don't think either of us are wanting him to move on, but if he does decide to move on, I don't think Michigan really has to go very far to look for their next head coach. One of the things that's staggering, and again, the differences between winning and losing, because simply a play or two can make a difference. That happened in the Michigan-Ohio State game. But Sharon Moore is 7 for 7 on fourth down since he first coached at Penn State. 7 for 7 on fourth down. And going for it a lot on fourth down has made him look like a very, very good head coach. And I think the players are excited to have him as their acting head coach.
And it's clear that, I talked about courage after how they handled the Penn State game with all the rushing. Well, to do all the things he did and how he mixed it up, and with the Donovan halfback pass and the really great play call to the tight end, so Loveland on one of the fourth downs, to putting Alex Orji in, right, to mix things up again, and it provided a little bit of a boost. Called a great game, a courageous game, someone living without fear, going on those fourth downs. Clearly has the trust of Jim Harbaugh to do all those things, clearly executed on it. And sure, it's all great when you win, but the fact is, either way, the man just did an outstanding job. And I think if you ask Michigan fans now, they'd be perfectly happy with a guy who just beat Penn State and Ohio State to be our head coach.
Yeah.
Not that they want Jim to go away.
No, but I have a feeling that Sharon Moore is going to be a head coach for some team in 2024. Let's look at the game itself for a bit, Greg. 30-24, Michigan winning over Ohio State. Some game plan checks that I had going into this week, and some of it we talked about on the podcast last week. Number one, I thought Roman Wilson and J.J. McCarthy needed to be healthy, and that was an absolute check on the yes, and Roman Wilson got that touchdown grab, and J.J. McCarthy was able to run a bit and get a couple of first downs with his feet. The offensive line winning on fourth down and in short yardage situations. Yes, they did. Yep. U of M was 3 of 3 on fourth down. The offensive line in this game, Greg, gave up 2 tackles for a loss and not a single hurry from this very aggressive Ohio State defense that was coming into this game ranked number 2, number 1, or number 3 in the nation in several defensive categories. And a second big key on defense is to prevent Marvin Harrison Jr. from having a Heisman-like performance.
His one-handed catch when he was interfered with was unbelievable. It was an all-time play in this series. And again, we usually talk about the great plays from the teams that won, but that's got to go up there. The guy is fantastic. So hats off. And by the way, JJ at the post game, like talked about respect for the Ohio State team. I share it, man. I got to say, for the players out there, of course we have feelings about Ryan Day and how he behaves. But, man, the players made this a heavyweight battle. And I do have a lot of respect for how hard and how good. That is a good football team. And we'll talk about their opportunity, potentially even to make the playoffs still, like later on when we look at what this all means for everybody. But they played their butts off.
He finished with 118 yards, a touchdown, 5 catches on 9 targets. Both of Michigan's interceptions were intended for Harrison Jr. I mean, that says a lot. And big players made big-time plays. Marvin Harrison Jr. did that. Trevion Henderson for Ohio State, like Blake Corum, didn't play in the game in 2022. He was able to have a couple of good drives where he was churning it and getting 5 and 7 or 8 yards a pop. Those runs that he had an impact on keeping Ohio State close in this one. And the third key, Greg, generating a pass rush on Kyle McCord, I thought was absolutely critical. And I don't think they really did, but they did get it on the most important play where it mattered, and that was Rod Moore's interception in the final minute.
Oh, yeah, he was clearly rattled on that one, but he looked rattled throughout the game. So, okay, wasn't the immediate pass rush right in his vicinity, but was he feeling it? I don't know. He was feeling something, because how many passes did he just completely miss the receiver? At least 4 times I counted, Steve. You cannot do that in this game. You cannot do it in a Big Ten heavyweight game like this.
Statistically, McCord was only sacked once, and the only hurry and knockdown was on the Buckeyes' final play of the game, the play that intercepted to end it.
But that doesn't mean he didn't feel the pressure, Greg.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like if you and I were back at quarterback in a Michigan-Ohio State game, I think I would feel the pressure as soon as I called for the snap.
Dude, I would feel the pressure deep down in my plums.
I can feel it down in my plums.
That's where I would feel it.
So heroes in this game, Greg, Rod Moore. We just talked about him. The 3-star safety from just outside of Columbus where he wasn't recruited by Ohio State.
Called game,
Loved
as he said. He called game.
Loved it.
He never took the turnover buffs off, I don't think.
Oh, that was great. Zach Zinner, man, what a hero. I mean, to me, this is a guy like Blake Corum who came back for the One More Year campaign, and he wanted to see something special happen to Michigan, and he's seeing it, but now he can no longer play it for the rest of the year. And I mean, he was Michigan's best offensive lineman. He came back, and Blake came back knowing that something like a season-ending injury could happen to you along the way. You know, the team responded on the very next play by Blake Corum getting that touchdown run.
Yep, flashed his number in the end zone. That was a shout-out to Zinner.
Yep. And Will Johnson, I mean, another key interception. Again, he underneath cuts the route. This is how he gets most of those interceptions.
To me, if there's one moment that really flipped the game, and I know that was early on, but that was just it. Flipped field position obviously led to the first score, and probably was the difference in the game.
There were a number of key moments that came down to inches. You think about all the different reviews that happened, before Rod Moore's interception, you had the forced fumble from Josh Wallace, and I think it was Julian Fleming that was ruled a catch and a fumble, and it gave Ohio State that field position that they were coming so critically close to getting their own game-winning touchdown.
What did you think about the Roman Wilson call in the field and the replay? And I was a little torn on if I was trying to take my maize and blue glasses off, right? And we've had history with Roman Wilson on catches right on the
TCU.
Right? Yeah, so we're talking about the play where it looked like he was kind of bobbling it when he went down, and he didn't end up with the ball. Once they kind of rolled off each other, Ohio State had the ball, called it a touchdown. Took a good look at it, had multiple reviews, and so they gave him the touchdown. What did you think?
So, first of all, every Ohio State fan thinks they got jobbed. And so if everybody's wondering about what the excuses are for Ohio State for the next 365 days, I'm going to say
I'm wondering.
There's 7 points that shouldn't have counted, and therefore Ohio State would have won the game. That ball is probably an interception if that ball is anywhere on the field besides the end zone. Because once you have the ball in the end zone and you have control of the ball, the plane has been broken, and therefore it is a score. It didn't matter that he was down or not. That matters in the middle of the field. And so I believe he had the ball, and I believe he had the ball in control as he broke the plane. And to me, that is a touchdown.
It was really close, though.
What happened?
You're describing was very close.
What happened after that is he got the ball taken away from him. And if that is in the middle of the field where the play is not ruled dead and stopped, Denzel Burke probably comes away with that interception. to me, the ball was in the paint already. The play is dead at that point.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about the following up process because he'd already had 2 feet down before going into the paint, had possession of the ball, and once he broke the plane, play's over.
Yeah.
Play's over.
The other one they overturned was JJ running for the first down. They gave it to him on the field. They reviewed. The ball was behind the line mark. It looked like a good call.
I agree with the call.
Yeah, I do too. Interesting, though, Steve. I didn't think he ran as much as I thought we'd like to see him run in this game. And he also could have laid out for that. He could have stretched out, and he didn't. Does that tell you anything about his health?
I think it tells you he's 100%.
Okay.
Because he's always done that kind of thing before, stretching his arm or stretching his body to get those first downs.
I mean, I'm used to seeing JJ running and straddling the line of scrimmage and whipping it across his body. Now, he did do that on that one play that was critical. I think it was like a 2nd and 6.
To Count Cornelius.
Who made an incredible grab
Yeah.
in the middle field. This is a traditional run right, throw left. Every coach is going, no, no, no. And CJ reverse field and just laid out for that grab. An incredible catch by CJ on that one.
Yeah.
You wanted to bring up James Turner.
Yeah, we've ignored kicking all year, and we said, well, we're concerned about it. We were so lucky with Jake Moody, by the way, who was at the game. And I got to give props to James Turner for making the 3 field goals. Turned out to be huge. The guy was clutch when we needed him, and he's basically been on the shelf all season and trotted out for the Ohio State game and made 3 big ones. And again, we just take it for such granted that what Jake Moody did last year. Well, here it was his time to shine, and he did it.
Right. Not a lot of action during the course of the season, and I was openly wondering about what he was capable of doing because Sharon Moore was going for it on 4th down so much inside field goal range. One of them was like a 4th and 8 against Maryland, and I'm like, this should be an easy field goal, and they went for it on 4th and 8. If they're doing that, then there must be something wrong with James Turner. But here he is kicking a 50-yard field goal and kicking 2 other field goals that aren't necessarily gimmies.
Oh, it was fantastic. And you could just see that being like the thing that gets us, right? It's like, okay, now we got to trot this guy out. And he did it. I got to give a shout out to Colson Loveland, too, who, again, he and Barner seem to be JJ's safety blanket when he needs something. We went to him again on that 4th down. Great call. Got a great play. And finally, JJ, let's dumb it down a little bit. It was about the quarterbacks in this game. And JJ was clearly the better quarterback. And I'm not saying it was his best game. They both had their hands on the ball most of the time in the game. And it was clearly JJ was better. If you want to point, yes, Marvin Harrison was the best receiver on the field, but we had some great performances. And they dropped some balls too. But JJ was clearly better than McCord. McCord missed open receivers. You can't do that in this game. JJ got it done. He led this team to the win. And so we got to give JJ a shout out.
So, Greg, often people have been making a mistake, and I've probably been one of them, who has said, Michigan, by beating Ohio State, they've won the Big Ten championship for a 3rd straight year. There's still another game that needs to be played in Indianapolis. It's against the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll preview the Hawkeyes coming up later on in this podcast.
Awesome. Any predictions on how the media and journalists and Pete Thamel and all these guys take the Harbaugh story and the sign stealing stuff now? Does it go to the back burner? What do you think?
It should in all this, and Michigan is still continuing to do its thing without an assistant coach, without Connor Stallions, winning impressively, going 12-0, no matter what distractions were being feasted upon them. I think the only thing that I'm kind of seeing from a national media perspective in terms of in writing at the moment is to say, well, it will be debated for years to come how big an impact it was, when before they were talking about what a huge impact this really is.
Okay.
And now it's kind of like, we can't ignore the fact that they did win this game. But, hey, 2024, there could be a whole lot more punishment, so we'll be happy to give you the juicy details,
Yeah, and now every conversation, because now the format's rarely just a person. Like, there are exceptions, like Joel Klatt just gives his take, and Colin Cowherd just gives his take, and Paul Feinbaum is just there. But all these other shows it's a conversation with someone. The person on the other side is going to have to go, well, yeah, but they beat Ohio State. They beat Penn State. They beat Maryland. I mean, come on.
Can I do the Jay Billis thing?
Sure.
I'll do the Jay Billis thing for a moment. This is what he likes to do when maybe he's even in the minority. Any reasonable person would see that Michigan isn't benefiting from this whole thing and conclude, so that's what Jay Billis does. If you disagree with me, you're an unreasonable person.
Yeah, that's a logical fallacy.
So,
Perfect. I love it.
And Greg, that brings us to halftime here on The Professor and the Pundit. So that means we're going to bring in Nick Hopwood, certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence.
Nick, let's say I'm saving for a trip to the college football playoff, maybe for 2 games right now. Do I keep that in cash, or do I buy like a 6-month CD or something like that, knowing that we're several months away from this theoretical trip that I'm talking about?
It is theoretical, but let's start saving for it. Why not, right? I would probably just use the money market, in my opinion, keep life a little bit simple. I think the rates will be the same over the next 6 months. I don't see a huge difference either way.
Yep. Okay, thanks, man.
Steve, which year was it that we played Alabama down in Dallas?
2012, Nick.
And that was Denard's senior year, right?
Right.
So I think that we were going to play them maybe 1 year in advance, something like that. And I thought, this is a game I have to go to. And sure enough, what I did is when I have my online savings account, you can create different buckets. So I created a Dallas bucket, and I started contributing like $500 a month to that. And sure enough, when we got to game time, the flight and everything was covered.
Yeah, because I've had a quote-unquote Pasadena fund for a long time, and it's
overflowing.
It's overflowing. It is.
And Nick, if people want to know more, how can they get a hold of you?
You can schedule an appointment with us at peakwm.com or give us a call at 734-681-7575.
One more time with that phone number?
734-681-7575.
So I saw Nick pregame, which I think is good luck. Also, by the way, yes, rest assured, Steve and I did go to Frazier's Pub with quite a few people, including Ira and some of our friends, Stevie D. And so we kept that tradition going, and now we are still undefeated in the Ohio game.
Yeah,
Steve.
so you and your buddies left, and then I stuck around, and I decided to chat with 3 Ohio State guys who were sitting at the doorway.
Reasonable Ohio State game?
Well, that's what I was trying to gauge, and I was going to make a comment short and sweet, see how they react to it. We started talking for several minutes, and yes, I found, believe it or not, 2 reasonable people. Now, of course, they really feel that Michigan benefited from everything, and they did own up to the fact that it didn't cost them the wins in 21 and 2022. They said, no, we just got beat.
You got them there. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising. But they did feel that the wins were tainted, but they still lost the game. Well, the third guy, he had left pretty early, and he came back, and I want you to imagine Will Ferrell as Harry Carey.
Harry Carey here.
And he's like, hey, your basketball team is getting curb stomped right now. Because, Michigan basketball was playing Texas Tech in the final game of Battle for Atlantis. I'll do the same to you tomorrow. And then he was like punching me in the arm, and anytime he was just trying to get
pickled.
A little? Or should I say, perhaps, a little? Come on, Greg.
He was not interested in having a conversation. He just wanted to get his jabs in and then try to get me fired up, which wasn't going to happen.
No.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good.
Not have a good tomorrow. I just said have a good night.
So we did hold that tradition, and it did hold. So Steve and I will grant it. If you want to find us on Friday before the next year's Ohio State game, you will know where to find us. Trust me, we'll be back in Frazier's. No problem. And we will both be in Indy. We're going to talk about that. I happened to do a lap to see people, around the west side there in the box. And who showed up during the game? Kid Rock himself, or Bob, as I call him now, because we're buddies, apparently.
What? What do you mean you're buddies, apparently?
Well, we're not. He doesn't remember who I am, of course, but I'd like to think that I'm friends with Kid Rock now. But we hung out and chatted. He asked me about my classes. He asked about NIL, Steve. He said, what's going on with that?
Is he a listener of the podcast?
I think he is. Hey, Bob.
His rating and reviews might do a whole lot for future listeners of the podcast.
Yeah, so I was talking about NIL with him, and this is probably only interesting because it was from Kid Rock, but I said, well, what do you talk about in this NIL class? And I'm like, well, we talk about everything related to it, how it works, how it got here, and I talk about like building brands, and we actually have a marketing component to it. And he's like, building brands? He goes, what people always forget about is talent. Is what he said. And I think it was a direct shot at social media stars and things like that who just kind of have a brand.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
I think that's what Kid Rock was talking about. I asked him about his Woodstock 1999 performance, which is It's one of my favorite sets at a festival concert. They really crushed it, if you know what I'm talking about. But I asked him, because he came out with a white mink coat, and I just asked him about the show. And there's like 500,000 people in the crowd. It's insane. And he said they were mad because they went on like in the middle of the afternoon and they thought no one was going to be watching. Like for whatever reason, they thought this would be like the worst time slot. When they got there and they saw that everyone was there, he was like, they couldn't believe it. I asked him about, there's this funny clip that Jay Leno, of course, the Tonight Show host after Johnny Carson, used to have this feature called Jaywalking, where he'd walk around Hollywood Boulevard and interview, strangers, and he'd talk them up and then ask them questions. And the whole idea was to get this like slice of Americana. Well, he did one of those with Kid Rock when Kid Rock was like 17 or 18 years old and was out in California. And he said, "What's your name?" And I'm Kid Rock. Like, what do you do? No one knows who this person is. I'm gonna make gold records. I'm gonna be a star. It's kind of goes like that. And I asked Kid Rock about that, and he basically said, "Man, I didn't know anything. I hadn't done anything. I was such a big talker." And he goes, "It wasn't even for like 7 more years before he even like made an album that people cared about," which I think was Devil Without a Cause. But It was really cool. It was bizarre. I mean, the guy is super famous. You had quite a buzz around him. I think he had a security guard with him. There was a big dude behind him the whole time.
And you got through.
I was sitting right there with him, and yeah, we talked for a little bit, and he was cool. I know he's kind of a politically charged guy. We didn't talk about politics. Didn't even talk about football, just kind of chatted. But I was really curious. He asked me a few questions about NIL, and I was really surprised. I don't think he's going to be on board. I don't think he's writing a check champion circle anytime soon. We didn't get that far, though, Steve. So.
And he'll remember you tomorrow? If you ran into him?
Yeah, hopefully in a good way. Yes, I doubt it, but maybe. Maybe he felt like some of the academia, which doesn't seem to be his path. I think he was in Hollywood Boulevard when he was 17, so I don't think he was there for school, Steve. Did you see that Michigan had a special nose bumper on their helmets?
No, not when you're in level 5 in the press box. You can't see a whole lot unless you decide to wear binoculars.
Yeah, okay. So I do the uniform timeline where I do all the little changes and nuances to the uniforms, including the helmets, of course. All the stickers are classified and categorized. Well, they had right above the face mask in the center of the helmet is what they call a nose bumper, right? It's up there. It's above your nose. Why they call it a nose bumper, I'm not sure. But Michigan made a special. And
it's not working for Blake Corum.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's clearly not protecting your nose or above your nose even. They made it a special one, right? It says Michigan, and with a 1 and a G in the middle of it in big letters, meaning 1G, a grand, 1,000. Like they made that for the game, and I assume they're going to wear that for the rest of the season. But who knows? What else, Steve? Oscars post-game was sick. The place was packed. This is everything we dreamed. Now, remember, consider this, guys. This is like Steve and I's hometown, like restaurant bar. It is a family restaurant, but they have a bar area. The waitresses and the owner is Oscar, of course. They recognize us when we come in. It's that kind of place. It's they don't shout our name like Norman Cheers. No! But they know who we are. They know what we want to drink usually. And we're having the post-game show there. See, that's what we're getting to experience here. And also a whole bunch of new fans, I think, of Oscars and the team and everything like that. And then Sam Webb himself shows up this time.
That's right.
To do the post game and do his rant on Ryan Day, which apparently is going viral on YouTube and other places.
The YouTube video is like 40 minutes long, but it was a little bit longer than that. Sam wanted to be on camera. He wanted to be on a live event, and they all started making it happen. And of course, he was absolutely on fire. I think one of our mutual friends suggested, how many hop slams did he have? And he had only 1, but he didn't even finish a full one before he was done. So that was Sam Webb sober.
No, it was. He was sober, but he was fired up. He went to 11, Steve, like he's done before. Okay, we've seen this. He takes it to a new level.
These go to 11.
It's funny. It's clever. It's biting. It's full trash talk. It's metaphors. It's the whole thing.
I believe I've linked it on my Twitter account at Steve Clark 02. I think you may have done the same thing at M. Victor's.
I think so. And I popped my greasy mug behind him a couple times and flashed the 3 for 3 straight against Ohio. It was quite a celebration. The place, again, was mobbed with, locals and Michigan fans and just people who wanted to extend the experience, which Steve and I like to do.
Big Ten notes. It's funny, after Michigan, Ohio State, you almost don't care about anything that happens in the Big Ten after that because it seems so middle school. in comparison to what Michigan, Ohio State is doing.
It was a mere amusement the other game, Steve. Amusement.
Yep, there were a couple of coaching moves that were made over the weekend. First of all, Michigan State hiring Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, Greg.
Middle initial C, so this is not another John L. Smith. This is Jonathan C. Smith, Steve.
That's a big difference. They don't want another John L.
No, and he goes by Jonathan. I got to say, without knowing much about him, I have only heard good things about this guy. In fact, when all the conference shakeup went, one of the storylines is how is an Oregon State going to keep a guy like Jonathan Smith if they don't have the budget, if they don't have the revenue coming in like from a big conference? How are they going to keep a guy like this? I've only heard good things. So they got to be excited about it.
He played at Oregon State. He left his alma mater. You have to at this point because you're basically absorbing the Mountain West, or you're being absorbed by the Mountain West. Power 5 to Group of 5, essentially. He has no Midwest ties at all. Was the Fiesta Bowl MVP for the Beavers. I don't know, because it's the former Beavers coach, whether he'll talk about chopping. Mel Tucker and Greg Schiano does.
Okay, like a beaver.
Keep on chopping. But
okay.
Yeah, with Beaver teeth, I don't know if that's going to continue.
All right.
Maybe he'll row the boat. I don't know.
I think they need to just bring him up to date on all the memes that have been used by other coaches. Oh, one funny note on the hire. So they tweet out a picture of Jonathan Smith announcing he's going to be the next coach. He's wearing a black quarter zip with Michigan State on it. And, of course, I'm reading the comments just to see if there's any snark or anybody, pissed about it. Everyone's like, go green. This is great. He's a great coach. Great hire, that kind of thing. And then way down in there, it was like, can we just get back to green and white, please? And not to have the black anymore. Okay.
Wow.
To me, it's the perfect fandom comment. Why do we start doing these other colors? Aren't we just green and white? Nothing about the coach, just that was his platform to complain about the use of black on some of the uniforms that state tends to do. By the way, I think they look kind of cool when they use the black, but just that's what was on that person's mind.
Do you think there's
we have a new football coach and we put him in a black quarter zip. I don't like that.
Do you think this
is already off to a bad start?
Do you think this is happening in Columbus, where Ryan Day loses his third straight game and somebody comments, "Can we have a little bit more gray in the scarlet?"
What happened to scarlet and gray? By the way, I'm not picking on state fans because it's just fandom. We're so picky, it just cracks me up.
The whole thing is with the new Pac-12 teams coming in, at USC and Washington and Oregon, it is just going to be so easy for the middle tier teams to just be irrelevant and forgotten about. The surprise to me was Tom Allen being fired at Indiana because of his buyout. And they're going to owe him $20.8 million. Really surprised by this, Greg. This is money that could be better spent on trying to be the best basketball team in the state, which they are not. And it's probably more important for them to be the best basketball team in the state and a Big Ten power, rather than trying to up yourself to be maybe finish 10th in next year's Big Ten.
I'm less surprised about the money. These football teams make so much money for the universities, and it's not just about the direct line to the revenue and for the athletic department budgets. It's so much bigger than that. So I'm not surprised when you see what happened at Texas A&M, and I'm not surprised here. It's worth it. It's worth it to the programs to make these changes. I know the numbers are staggering, and yes, that could fund every non-revenue sport for a generation. It doesn't matter. Football is king.
Texas A&M, $150 million to fire and replace. I know that they're getting, $50, $60 million a year, but that's like 2 times the yearly. I mean, this is like watching the national debt
it's a big
in
number.
Washington. And in Indiana, as I said,
they wouldn't pay it, though, Steve, if it wasn't worth it to them.
Right, but I'm thinking, what are you gaining at Indiana at this point?
I know, I get your point.
You're paying $20 million, bring in somebody else so that you can finish 10th.
I know it, at best, in 18-team leagues. What else we got going on? Because now we got to start thinking about Michigan beyond next week, Steve, in the playoff. So we do have to keep an eye on some national notes. Was anything of interest?
I tell you, all the rivalry games going into the weekend seemed to lack the juice. Giant point spreads. It was all about Michigan and Ohio State. But rivalry week proved once again how difficult it is, even for the big favorites who have a lot on the line to keep winning. Take a look at the Iron Bowl. Last week, Alabama lost 31-10 to New Mexico State. New Mexico State! And they're a 2-touchdown underdog to Alabama and ended up having their heart ripped out because they felt like they had that game in hand. They were leading. They had forced a punt with less than 5 minutes to go in the game. Auburn's getting the ball back, and they muffed it. They muffed the punt in their own territory. Alabama's got it back. But what ripped their heart out worse than that, what are the chances of converting a 4th and goal from the 31-yard line?
Almost zero.
It's less than 0.1%.
Yeah.
And Alabama made it happen. They threw a ball, a 31-yard touchdown pass in the back corner of the end zone. It's caught by Isaiah Bond, and Alabama is still in the playoff hunt. They've got to beat Georgia, but it's still a possibility.
Yeah.
They're still alive. Washington and Washington State. Huskies, a 15.5-point favorite. They needed a field goal as time expired. Georgia, a 24.5-point favorite over Georgia Tech. They only win by 8. And number 10, Louisville loses to in-state rival Kentucky 38-31 on a 37-yard touchdown run with over a minute left, which, by the way, really hurts Florida State because Florida State, without their starting quarterback, needs to say that, hey, like, we beat somebody of consequence in the ACC championship game. We had LSU in week 1. But other than that, we really don't have much of a leg to stand on in terms of big wins. Counting on a top 10 win over Louisville, they're not going to get it because Louisville lost to Kentucky. They're going to be out of the top 10 in the ACC championship game.
Okay, so I think Michigan will be number 1. This will probably come out after the playoff, but we won't know. But I think Michigan will be number 1, certainly number 1 or number 2. Is Michigan in no matter what happens in the Big Ten championship game?
No. I will
why.
say no.
Most people
I think
so right now.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's more than likely they would be, but a couple of things can happen. For example, let's say Alabama beats Georgia, and you know Alabama as a one-loss SEC champion is going to get in. Georgia, who has been number 1 through at least half the playoff rankings,
Yep.
and since they're the 2-time defending champions, there's going to be some benefit of the doubt there. Probably more benefit of the doubt than a Michigan team at this point. What if Washington wins out and they're undefeated?
They have to go. Yeah.
And then, of course, you have Florida State. What if they win out? Let's also not forget that Texas, as a one-loss champion out of the Big 12, whose only loss came in a final minute against a top 10 team in Oklahoma at a neutral field. I think there are some scenarios that could happen where Michigan could get left out, but I would say at this point it's more than likely that Michigan is going to be playing.
So if they're number 1, I think it'll signal that they're probably going to be in. But you're right. If Alabama beats Georgia and Alabama gets in, Georgia will probably be in. Washington and Florida State win. Then you've got a tough situation for Michigan. And you've got to still think that there's people in that committee room that would like to punish Michigan, even though they're not supposed to. So Michigan needs to beat Iowa. That's it. And they should be fine. So Big Ten title game, Michigan's the away team again. We were 2 years ago, I believe. We were home last year. So we'll see for uniform people. Expect to see the whites in some form or another. So what about the Hawks, who, if there's any team we've talked about more than any other than Michigan this year, it's been Iowa. We even had a guest from an Iowa pundit.
Pundits.
Right. So we've talked about Iowa a lot, and it's not just because, Steve, your family has ties to Iowa and all that good stuff. It's because they've been the most interesting story probably outside of Michigan in the Big Ten all year. And lo and behold, I think if I would have predicted we were going to meet Cade McNamara and Eric All. Somehow that serendipity would happen and hit. And, of course, we are going to play Iowa, but going to be without those guys, which is a really interesting take.
Because of season-ending injuries.
Yeah, and I assume this is a team, like all of them, but I guess especially, Steve, that you know pretty well. And you are well-equipped to break them down for us.
So it is a rematch from 2021. Michigan won that game 42-3, and that's the sole reason why I think my wife isn't coming to the game, because she was just so disappointed they couldn't put up more than that. This team is 10-2. And I can't believe that this team is 10-2. Their best win of the year, I think it's debatable, but I'm going to say it's the Rutgers game because it was 22-0 over a Rutgers team that, started Big Ten play at 6-2. And it showed that they had a pulse on offense in that one. Their other 6 conference wins, Greg, were by 10 points or less. 3 of their conference wins were by 3 points or less. Their worst loss of the 2, well, is it Minnesota or is it Penn State? That's an easy one. Penn State, 31-0. Where the Hawkeyes had more fumbles than first downs, 6-4, and were held to 76 yards of total offense. You want to talk about inept and anemic. That is the Iowa offense that, was expected to struggle to begin with before the season, but they had those season-ending injuries to Cade McNamara and Eric All and Luke Lachey. It's their two best playmakers. And then you may have heard that their best defender, Cooper DeJean, was lost to a season-ending injury in practice a few weeks ago. They're last in the NCAA, 130th in total offense. Here's the broad brush, Greg. They didn't play Michigan or Ohio State this year. They got humiliated by Penn State, and they found a way to barely beat everyone else. Their other loss was to Minnesota on that controversial illegal fair catch signal that gave Iowa the game-winning TD late. Last Friday after the press conference, Kirk Ferentz had some expletives to describe how he still feels about that call. In the middle of that, it was quite honest and real. But Michigan here is a 22-point favorite. Here's the fine print, though. They somehow find a way to win games in the clutch through their defense, through their special teams, and yes, occasionally even on their offense, even if it may be their only explosive play of the game. They did that a couple of weeks ago where they got a 30-yard touchdown run late in the fourth quarter against Illinois to clinch the Big Ten West for them. So it can happen. They can run through a brick wall and get nothing, but then there's just one play that goes for 60 yards down the field, and that's all they need because the defense is good enough to hold people down to less than 10 points a game. Players to know, if you care to, quarterback Deacon Hill, transfer from Wisconsin. Keith Jackson would call this guy a hoss. He's 6'3", he's 258. A big man. He's a Jared Lorenzen type, if you back and remember the Kentucky quarterback back in the day. He's played 11 of 12 games, has 5 passing touchdowns on the year, 6 interceptions, has an efficiency rating of 91. The only Big Ten quarterback to be under 100. Has less than 1,000 receiving yards, completes less than 50% of his passes. Running backs, LaShawn Williams, he wears number 4. He is the Iowa rushing game, and in particular, the rushing game has been blocking a lot better as the season has progressed. Williams leads the team with 779 yards and has an average that's actually better than Blake Corum throughout the year at 5.0. But LaShawn Williams has only 1 rushing touchdown on the season. Then you have Caleb Johnson. He wears number 2. He leads the team with 3 rushing touchdowns. Former Wolverine Eric All, who we kind of wanted to see in this game, played in only half their games, still leads the team in receiving. Isn't that stunning?
It is stunning.
You play
Eric
half
All,
the games, and Eric All still leads the team in receiving.
They're so funny, man. They're just quirky, straight up. I don't want to get into a close game with these guys.
No, there was a game, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, where Iowa threw a touchdown pass to a receiver for the first time since September 16th.
Right. It was just a week or two ago.
So on defense, linebacker Jay Higgins, 141 tackles. It's a Big Ten high, and second place is not even close.
Detroit Lions, here he comes.
I mean, I think if the second place tackler on the Big Ten played 2 more games, he won't catch Jay Higgins.
Okay.
That the enormous impact that Jay Higgins has as a linebacker for Iowa. The team defense and special teams, as we all know, is how they beat you. They allow only 12 points per game. And a stat produced by CBS on Friday, you're going to love this, said the most wins that a team has ever gotten this century when producing less than 250 yards of offense per game is 4. 4 wins, and Iowa shatters that with 10. Their rushing and pass defense each rank 4th in the Big Ten. This isn't, to me, a vintage Iowa defense from years past, especially with Cooper DeJean out.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So he got hurt in practice?
Yeah.
Okay, that sucks because that guy can ball. I mean, it doesn't suck for Michigan, but he was fun to watch, man.
He's a big-time playmaker and the guy that they rely on to have a big punt return for a touchdown. It worked against Michigan State. It was going to work against Minnesota, but they called it back for that illegal fair catch signal that probably wasn't. But, Michigan loses Zach on the line, and who knows how battered the players are going to be after the Ohio State game. If J.J. McCarthy was a bit battered from the Penn State game, or Blake Corum was a bit battered from the Penn State game, didn't play as well against Maryland, Michigan has to go right up and play Iowa the very next week. Iowa's got 1 extra day of rest. Special teams-wise, I got to mention because it's so important, Torrey Taylor, their punter, actually does flip the field.
He's remarkable.
Every time out. If Iowa goes 3 and out when they start from their own 25, you're still probably getting your ball back inside your own 20.
It's fantastic.
They lead the nation in net punting, And then here is one, I've discovered this one myself. Iowa has punted for 3,800 yards. That is 600 more than the team with the second most is Michigan State. I just don't have the time to go back and check every team this year, let alone all the teams in other years that were really, really bad for consistency. But the Hawkeyes have punted for 800 yards more than their total offense.
Are you kidding me?
They have less than 3,000 yards of total offense. They do have 3,800 yards of punting. I thought, okay, let's look at some of the anemic teams in the Big Ten. So I looked at Michigan State, who's the second most in punting yards. Their total offense is more than 1,000 than their punting yards. I looked at Indiana next. I'm like, well, Indiana could be a candidate, right? More punting yards? No. Indiana's total offense has more than 1,000 yards than their punting in terms of yardage. So I have to wonder at this point, how many teams would actually have more punting yards and total offense? And considering that Indiana and Michigan State lead by about 1,000 or more, I'm thinking the answer is no one.
Yeah, nobody. 3,800, that's over 2 miles, Steve, of punts. It's ridiculous.
But this is how Iowa wins. They'll put you back deep. The honest thing is here, the Big Ten West really stinks in terms of offensive production. Who is a reasonable quarterback out of the Big Ten West? Is Hudson Card your best quarterback in the Big Ten West? No. Tied for last place. Iowa, because of that, their defense has been allowed to remain strong. I just don't see the players like they used to have and the number of turnovers they used to have. They're just kind of stopping people because I think the Big Ten West offenses are really anemic. So, Greg, that kind of wraps up the Iowa report. You and I will be at the Slippery Noodle next Saturday for WTKA's Countdown to Kickoff for a third consecutive year. Noodle's a short walking distance from Lucas Oil Stadium, and I will tell you, it is a large place, but seating is at a premium. We're going to start the broadcast at 4 p.m., but you'll need to be there much sooner to see us. Greg, Michigan, back-to-back Big Ten champs, looking for a three-peat this weekend. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue, man. Go Blue.